So, what my hope today is to talk about the power of story. And I think Lisa gave an incredible introduction about the essence. And we're going to talk about that when Todd sits with me up here later in the discussion, because I want to get at his story. Like, there's an opportunity, but we live in a world that is shiny and glitzy and done in a certain number of characters and images. And while that's well and good, and we can stay connected in these brief moments, we struggle to understand the essence of who somebody is. And when we don't do that, we miss opportunity. Now, I'm just somebody by nature. I say yes to everything. And by saying yes, I've traveled all around the world, and in 3 weeks, I'm back in Africa and Tanzania with WaterAid, because I said yes. So it makes my wife a little bit crazy that I say yes all the time, and my kids, but I see how these things connect, and that's what I want to do today. Because one thing that's really fascinating to me is, and we'll talk about this, but like, I've been in a refugee camp in Eastern Africa, 70,000 refugees. And when you sit down with them, they have nothing. The challenges that they face as humans, I can relate to, as if I'm talking to somebody in East Lansing, or in Cleveland, or in San Diego. Yet we think that they're so different, and they're not. And so that's what my hope today is, especially this morning, is to pull that out. And I figured, why not show some media? So I'm going to show different elements of storytelling that I think pull out the essence of what it means to capture story. We'll even talk about my own Michigan State experience. I want to take you, this is about 9 months ago, I was asked to host a business conference in Los Angeles. And it was very exciting, because I was going to spend time and interview Damon John of Shark Tank, and the second in command with Richard Branson and the Virgin brand, and the woman who invented Sprinkles cupcakes out of the vending machines, basketball players, all these kinds of fun things. So high pressure. And then I find out when I get there, oh, by the way, Magic Johnson's going to be here. And it was one of those, like, can I not be professional here? Can you just make that happen? And they made that happen. And I had to lean into those experiences that I've had far across the planet before I met with Magic. His people come in, we're in this sort of, secure room. He's got his handlers, I call them handlers, security, all these sorts of people, and they're checking you out. They want to make sure they know what you're going to ask, how you're going to ask it, stay this far away, stay this close, and I understand that because he's so recognizable. And so when he came in, he was a little bit reserved because there were all these people wanting to mic him up. The sound guy ran right up to him, and it was like, hold on a second. And I thought, what am I going to do? And so it was my time to kind of introduce myself, because we were going to conduct the interview. And I just said, well, Magic, just a couple of Spartans hanging out in LA. And he changed his entire energy towards me. And he gave me a big hug, and that's a big hug. That's a big hug. And I thought, okay, we're good. But then I was so panicked, because whenever you sit down with somebody and you talk with them, what's the first question? How do you get out of the gate where they feel connected? And like, this is going to be a different experience. And I think that's even when we're alumni, and we're talking with those that maybe want to volunteer and participate. Like, what's that first engagement like? So I'm going to share something, and I'm so glad this was captured. But the first question I asked elicited this response. And so I was so thankful that someone in the room captured that. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't have a framed copy of that. But the first question that I asked was, again, how do I connect? What are the things that are emotionally that I connect to? 1988, I am in Metro Detroit, huge Pistons fan. It's, NBA Finals of the Pistons, and there's this thing called the Phantom Foul, where they called Bill Laimbeer a foul on Kareem, and that was it. And I was 11 going on 12, and I was crying my eyes out. And I thought, you know what? Who in the world has ever asked him if that was really a phantom foul? I have to ask him that. And that's what I asked him. And what was great about that, one, it was helped me, because that's part of storytelling, is to understand your own role, and we'll talk about that. But it also helped him then go down paths of exploration with me together. And so what followed was, you would think, and I'm so glad that Lisa brought this up about Todd, and maybe the natural thing would be to talk about your first-round draft pick. Did you play with Michael Vick? All those sorts of things. What Magic and I talked about had nothing to do with basketball. what I asked him a question after this, and that really sort of drove the interview, was about mental health as an entrepreneur. Are we supporting young entrepreneurs and how they understand perfectionism, anxiety, like their role, wearing many hats? He said he had never been asked that question before. And the interview went much longer than it was supposed to, which, of course, everybody in the room was like, we got to go, we got magic, we got to get out of here. But it was a fantastic experience for me to be able to say, just trust my instincts, right? I don't know many of you in this room, but I bet if we sit down for 5 minutes, we're going to get to know each other, right? We'll get to know each other. And that, to me, is the way in which you connect and you figure out what stories you can tell. And when I think about it, and I'm going to go through these different stories, it's important to know that this is me, but I'm on a pursuit to seek stories on the margins. That's my goal. I'll tell people in corporate America when they want to bring me in or work with their CEOs or speak to their folks, if you want me to talk and just regurgitate a press release, I'm the wrong guy. Because to me, that's easy, that's lazy. I just say that amongst family. That we could do more. Like, let's look at the margins, let's understand. And I'm so glad Lisa also talked about sort of the confusion around messaging with Michigan State and all the different things that we've seen throughout the last couple of years that make us squeamish a little bit and hoping for a better outcome, right? And so what's important to me is understanding that all of these things weave together if we're willing to say yes. Like here in the bottom left, that's me when I first got to go to Senegal, interviewing hospital staff, and that led to me then going to Rome and meeting with the Pope and United Nations officials. And because of that, I got to go to Uganda and the refugee camp, and those are the pictures here, right in the middle here. And these are pictures that I took of the students there and the two boys looking in the windows. That, to me, is the story. The boy in the middle, he anchors the image, but the boys in the window, they're the ones that you want to go and understand their story. And are we changing our perspective to understand that story? And for Lisa, just a little note, she watched my TEDx about storytelling, and I should let you know, Lisa, that it's in that door, behind that door, that I wrote my TEDx at the refugee camp. So it's always around us. Story is always around us. And for me, what I like to talk about is there are 3 elements to story, to keep it simple: the purpose, the impact, and the role. And so we're going to talk today and give examples of what it means to be purposeful in our storytelling and how that can impact the way in which we are received. And what's important about that is that you look at these different images, and I'm going to introduce you to Jane here in the bottom left. She's the head of Water Aid in Uganda. Obviously, you know in the top left. And here in the middle, you might say, that looks like the apocalypse. Well, no, that's just prior to the rainy season, and that's what the refugees do to get the land ready for the few crops that they can grow to survive. So to them, this is beautiful. And it was to see that in person. So again, frame is important. And that led to, and we're going to talk about it, but this is so fascinating, that the Spartan, sort of the voice of Spartan around the world. So you see this picture on the bottom right? So I'm on my way to the refugee camp. It's a very long flight from Nashville, New York, all the way. You stop in Togo, a country in Africa, and I'm waiting there. We don't deplane. And a young man gets on, and he puts that hat on his knee. A local. And I thought, now, I'm going to use that someday. And so here's that day. And he was very passionate about escaping what he had come from and wanting to educate himself. And he had come upon Michigan State, and he would never think of, in essence, being able to come to Michigan State, but it represented something to him, and that if he wore that hat, it meant he had dreams, he had aspirations. That was his story. And it's been really fun to stay contacted with him over WhatsApp and just get updates on what he's doing in school and those sorts of things. Those are little stories that you get that then support a larger story that we don't know when people know that we're Spartans. Sometimes they do. And how are we representing ourselves, and maybe do we understand the value with which we're communicating? And it goes to what I would say is the utility of story. It's funny because we don't think of story that often. Now, Harvard Business Review and business magazines are now putting it all over their covers because they understand we better understand our story. But in general, we don't talk about it. I don't hang out with Pamela at Starbucks and say, oh, you have a good story. It just doesn't, it's not how you deliver it. But you know when we do think about story is when we go on a first date, we go on a job interview, or we get pulled over by a cop. What's your story? Right? What's your story? And what's followed by that, once you've told your story, is the dreaded question that follows. Because we're nervous about how do we respond to that. We thought at the very beginning, here's my story, and then, they're going to have a follow-up. Well, I like to reframe it, and here's an example. I love this book. I'd love to interview this author, but it's What Do You Do with an Idea? Children's book. So when I reframe utility, I think about when I used to read to my children, who are now 11 and 9, and how, like with this book with my daughter, we would read that, and the reframe was the question that she would give me as I was sharing this story would bring us together. It wasn't about something that made me feel distinct or different or marginalized. It was about a connection, about a bringing together. And so that's where I go back here. So this middle picture here, that's Congo Rabina, the woman right there holding the young child. The reason why I went to the Mvepi refugee settlement in Uganda was to study folklore, the birthplace of story. Right? I was a kid in a candy shop. How incredible is that? So every night there was a fire in these different sort of factions of the refugee camp where the locals would tell their stories. Now, of course, I didn't speak the local language, but I had an interpreter and we would be able to understand the power of those stories and what they represented. And the reason why I want to share that with you today is because, again, that Spartan hat, what that meant to that young man, in almost every story that I heard at that refugee settlement, do you know what it was about? What they were about? They were about animals. They were often about the hare, right, the rabbit, basically breaking free from bigger predators. It goes back to when they were being colonized by anybody but them, when their entire society was put into the crosshairs. How did they survive? How did they communicate together to maintain some level of unity? The utility of story. And so, yes, it may have sounded childlike because it had to do with a hare escaping a predator, right? Or doing something that might look deceivious in the West, but really to them it meant there was pride, standing up for culture. And so again, how do we understand those elements? And so I want to now take us to Jane, who you see in the bottom left. This was last year. We are in a riverbed, and I want to play this story for you because I want to show you what purposeful storytelling looks like. And I'll give you a little Cliff Notes here. If they use Cliff Notes anymore, students, that might have really dated me there. Let's put in an 8-track and let it roll. I want you to pay attention. I think sometimes, especially when we represent an organization, right, we think we have to be perfect in our messaging. But there's such power in the human connection when we're actually not perfect. And you're going to see me step in it, as they say, a few times in this interview. But that was purposeful because I don't ever want to come in telling somebody. I don't want to tell a recent graduate how they should participate as alumni, right, as an example. These things are important if you want to create a sustainable relationship with those that come after us. So I want to play this interview. What emotions run through you when you walk and you see a river that is not a river anymore?
No, this is really the crude realities of many Ugandans in this region. It's a region that is quite dry, and the challenges that they face when they are looking for water is immense, and it takes its toll on the communities, and particularly the women and the girls. So when I'm walking down this dried up river and looking at my fellow Ugandans, the women, the girls, I feel the pain because I don't know how I would have managed if I was to carry or participate in such activities every day. Yeah, every day that you wake up, you need water. If I don't, then that means, what does the family do?
I know that women and girls, the topic is so important and personal to you, Jane.
Yeah.
And so this process, how often are they coming down on a regular basis? Is this in the early morning?
Rod, how much water do you use in your home? Yeah, you need water for cleaning. When you wake up in the morning, you need to wash your face. You need to clean the house. You need to cook. You need to wash your clothes. You need to bathe. And if you have a family of 10 children, that is the amount of water that they need. This is the time when it's the rainy period, but we're still fetching water like this. And in the dry seasons, there isn't, even as they do this, there is no water. And they have to walk distance. And some of these distances are so long that they can also face other challenges. Yeah, that's good.
You've got it?
Yeah, I have it.
I'm probably carrying over 50 pounds.
Yeah.
Easily 50 pounds,
Yeah.
if not more. And do women put this on their head, this size of a container?
Yes.
They do.
They will have one on their head, they'll have a baby on their back, and they may even have something else in the hand.
What about an injury? What about a young woman that cannot carry such weight?
Why wouldn't she be able to carry such weight?
I don't know. I mean, I will admit my back is already hurting. And
Rod, those are the luxuries
Here,
of probably your world,
Yeah.
but not the luxuries of this world.
That's very well said.
Oh, thank you. You cannot look at the challenges that we have in isolation to other things. The aspect of climate change, it is impacting so much our communities. But the bigger challenge that we have is the resources are limited, especially now with all the other global events, the Ukraine war, COVID came. So it is further compounding.
It's like get back in line.
There is so much that needs to be done to be able to address and be adaptive, but also to mitigate. Well, for us, your countries are more, they need to mitigate because you guys are the ones that are giving all the emissions.
You don't have to say
and
it quietly.
And the
We
impact
are.
and the impact is heavily faced in our communities. So how do we create and make the adaptations that need to be able to take form?
Jane, what an honor and a privilege to spend time with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
You noticed how she used the word impact, right? There was purpose in what she said. She wasn't just the director of Water Aid for Uganda. She's a mother of 2 daughters. She's a wife. She's a sister. She's a representative of her country. And she talked about impact. Impact is what relates to purpose. If we don't understand our purpose and how we want to extract a story, we're going to really struggle to create impact. And some of that is understanding the messiness of story, and that it's not always perfect. It's not always glitzy. It's not something we just can put in a marketing campaign. That there's so much more that's behind sort of the curtain of what we think we should be saying and sharing with people. I want to talk about, there's a saying that when you're happy, you love a song. And when you're sad, you understand the lyrics. And why I think that's important is when I think about my experience at Michigan State, and I'm honest with my own story, how connected was I? Because on a good day, it was amazing. I was right there feeling a part of a win or a bright sunny day. And I was sad when I went to the student parking lot and the snow was up past my brake lights, right? And at that point, when those things would happen, this is all I felt that I was. That's my student ID. And the reason I say that is because we have thousands in the Michigan State family across the planet. And I think it's not a responsibility, maybe it's an opportunity for us to get behind the data, right? It's not just about graduation rates or who has a really great LinkedIn profile so that can then show that our College of Social Sciences is doing well, right? It's the stories behind the numbers. But I think sometimes we fall prey to the natural reaction to tell stories that we think we have to tell. Why do we have to tell these stories anymore? We're living in an incredibly different world. I interviewed Deepak Chopra. Many of you probably know Deepak Chopra, and he said something to me that absolutely, to this day, even when I say it, I just can't wrap my head around it. He said, Gen Z is getting very uncomfortable with the physical world. They're used to manipulating a digital world. So if that's the premise, and we're moving into an AI world where answers are becoming readily available, we're gonna have to lean on questions and relationships and stories, not the pursuit of the answer. And so I think it's really important to be thinking about that. Now, when we talk about impact in storytelling, sometimes we don't know where it's going to come from, and sometimes we can't be the perfect planner. We can't, as an alumni base, say this is what we're going to start with and this is where it's going to end, because we just don't know. But I think if we go in with purpose and we allow something to breathe, it's like a decanter for wine, like letting everything sort of breathe. We don't have to rush everything. We might realize that we really like something. We like a story. We like that glass of wine. We like that experience at the summit, right? Those things are incredibly important. And recently I interviewed a Vietnam veteran. And I was racking my brain with how to approach this, because the kid in me, the storyteller, was just excited to spend time with someone and understand a little bit about his experience. But I didn't want to sort of be that guy. I didn't want to just ask him the things that people would just ask in general, or that they might be afraid to ask because of the violence, right? And the numbers of losses and these sorts of things. And so I thought, what do I do? So I'm going to play the response. The question I asked him was, David Holdridge is his name. I said, David, if I give you a blank canvas for you to paint your experience of war, what would you paint? And this is what he said. And listen, and by the way, you're going to hear, he sounds like he's trying to catch his breath. This is because of the injury where his throat was almost slit. And so since Vietnam, he's totally fine, but he can't capture air the way you might think. So it's not him being dramatic, it's just sort of the trials and tribulations of war.
There was this nurse that when they took me off the medevac helicopter and pushed me in to the Quonset hut, and she bent over and closed this off and basically said, asked me my religion. And I was able to spit out, am I gonna die? And she said, no, I'll never forget, no, we have to ask that. And I looked up at her, and she's everything that I didn't have out in the field. Her face was kind, and it was beautiful to my eyes, because it was nothing like what I was living out there on the perimeter outside. And I said, kiss me. And then the pentothal hit.
Every time I hear that, I just feel emotional about that, because he's talking about an experience where he's at death's door and the nurse is reading him his sort of last rites before the pentothal hits, and he just has this image and it's like this Hollywood narrative. And by the way, fascinating fact about David is he's a storyteller. He loves to write. So it was just an incredible connection to be able to pull that out of him. And here's the impact that we couldn't have predicted, like I was just saying a moment ago. Since our interview, he has had more veterans and families who've listened to that and reached out to him. It has changed his life. That wasn't I didn't have that as sort of at the outset. I just wanted to be respectful and engage with him in a dignified way. That was my only purpose. But I knew that if I did my job in understanding going on the margins, we might get a story that was really impactful. I think that's impactful. That to me is powerful. Now that may feel dramatic compared to alumni relations and these sorts of things, but it's also that our alumni, they're all going through all kinds of things. They're not immune. None of us in this room are immune. And so we don't know exactly what people are bringing into a conversation or a story or a summit. And sometimes it's okay to let it breathe and just understand if there's a blank canvas, how might we approach it together? And that goes to the role that we play. You might wonder, what role are we talking about? Why would that be a part of storytelling, being purposeful, impact, and role? I think it's actually the thing we forget. Sure, when we watch a movie or we read a story, we know the characters, right? But we don't ever think about ourselves in that. We don't think about the role that we play in the questions that we ask. I'll tell you this, I know that when I sit in that chair and Todd sits here, we're playing different roles in the way in which we're going to organically, hopefully, tell a story here this morning. But role is incredibly important because it allows us to think about our impact on others, right? The way in which we are going to participate in that story. And sometimes we participate at different levels. Sometimes we're on the fringes. Sometimes we're right in the middle of it. And sometimes we're just advising. So this next clip that I want to show you is I got to, at the refugee camp, I met a local photographer in Uganda named Joseph. Incredible photographer, and it's a hobby of mine that one day I'm going to hopefully pursue in a much larger manner. Became friends with him, and then when I went back to Uganda with WaterAid in the river with Jane, they said, "Do you know a good photographer?" And I said, "We've got just the guy." Right? So even through story, I expanded what his opportunity was, and he went with me there and documented what you saw. Well, just last week, he sent me a note on WhatsApp and said, "Hey, Rod, I've worked on this mini documentary. You've inspired me to look at stories in a different way," because he's in the NGO world, right? You know, the WaterAids, sort of these different organizations that are trying to do their best to help disenfranchised groups around the world. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but he said, "Could you lend your voice and your writing to a script of what I'm trying to show?" Again, my role was different. It changed. So I want to show this, and then I'm going to tell you what happened. And he just pushed this out like 4 days ago. So this hasn't even been played anywhere here, but it has been locally in Uganda.
No one dreams of being poor. We all aspire for a life without struggle, without constant worry. But sometimes, circumstances force us down an unforgiving path.
Abana tomunyumba tuli bantu 15 aba ni 12 abezikulu basatu singoti byembi bosi ngana abana fizi y'abana ngendo mwikatari napasi nimuna bane fizi y'abana nanda yekanambura ebantu bahatiye mukali onda ndiye koleki ndiye bapasi likatari.
Poverty clings to our society, showcasing its ugly face at every corner. It's as if we're in an ongoing battle against an invisible force that drains the life out of us.
Ndi mfuakati tinyina musaija konga nyina abana bungurolera abatina wisebu enyikara yangu kwikara ndi muntu wenaku tingufuna na kataito tinyina buyambi bwona ningenda kupagasa nuko mvune echo kuli cyabana hanyuma nebyo kujwara rundi ngakaindi form ngaku tagenzera hamisiri abantu kusera ko akokulya tingufuna kokulya hanu manya katoke miringo yone yundagamba tinyine cyo kora betinyo ngabona muno nabana nimbore cyo kubakora
nguti abani 10 esanu hanu hana mukaga sebala soma asenze singuwire abana ubuyembi nyumba nikaniwo abana bebyere suka sebawete byere wonyera kusebawete ejisika tuko mchenyo miche umerera ivubuosi kanyumba nikake kutse
anani singawote murom ngalinji wena murumi akwiri mwanzi yakwa abana mukaga singuti kirolera kisicho singalinji wena murandu lo sibabenyegana ikere mwinji wena abana ngabalembera omwa bihumu ngatuta koleri katara singaleri ngale murundi oyi abana babirore cyale stars habe bure byeba.
If we unite, support one another, we can overcome anything. Knowledge empowers us and gives us the tools to navigate this complex world. We fight poverty by equipping ourselves with education, skills, and opportunities.
Ninamu ebizibu ebya school fees usanga abazaire tukasanga isomero amasomero galhara ate chokora twachwamu tuje tukora heihi ukatukora yoku twagamba tuje tuyamba abantu baitu abatayina buyambi twariti isomero heihi ate mukuyamba abazaire abandi tukaramuno kubahemeremo haisomero kwantu limange kibanja ntubeta ntubanabo kwantu ombeka onde batuletera emiseke batuletera emiti yo kuombekesa nuko ntubara yusente
school fees ikabi ni mundremesia kusangwa singa uthi nyingiri ekaunza nario ngavya namavihikaho nario vyangalelera nainatsukereswa ndimirimo kusukuru natsukere yakola miviri yekalakalire nario ngangahikaho nario weyana vandu nario nevyare lyesivesa lushunga ndeke nario kesi sivekesya ndeke nario naine evinangalirire.
Fighting poverty is not just about breaking free from it ourselves. It's also about lending a hand to those still entangled in its grasp. And by fighting poverty, we give hope to one another.
He's never done this before, and it's so, we talk about impact and role, the role that he played. So this, I think it was on Tuesday or Wednesday, he showed it around Uganda, and the families in there have already been taken care of as of yesterday from the capital in Kampala. So again, we don't know, right? We don't know when our stories are going to impact people at different levels and how they then want to contribute. That's the important part, right? So whether you're an NGO, you're a university, or you're an alumni group, you're an organization, a corporation, a startup, we have got to get out of this show and tell mentality, this campaign mentality to storytelling, because all that does is keep distance. If I just tell you today, if I sit down and have lunch with one of you today, and I just tell you how great Michigan State is without understanding your story and why it might be meaningful to be a Spartan, then I've missed the boat. In fact, I've missed the opportunity. I didn't even leave the port of opportunity because all I was doing was showing and telling. And if I live in a campaign mentality, which, truth be told, universities can fall into that, right? It's like, well, this is our big fundraiser, or this is the big event. And so everything gets pushed into this, this tiny little pipe, and we wonder why we need enough water pressure to get it out to everybody, where it's gonna have meaning, it's gonna have impact. But if we put together purpose with what we're doing, we understand and try to look at the impact, and we'll talk about this later in the breakout session, the impact of our message, then we're gonna understand what role we should play in executing against that. So the last thing I want to play is this gentleman. His name is Abba, and he is African by birth, and he was a refugee, and he moved to Stockholm, Sweden. And when he went to Stockholm, he started off like a lot of refugees. He worked odd jobs, anything he could get to survive. He started off as a dishwasher at a restaurant, and today, years later, he is the president and CEO of the largest restaurant group in Stockholm, like where the future queen eats. Like that's the level that he's ascended to. And because of that, he's wanted to make sure that his story is a part of what he's doing. So he tells the story here because I went with him and his foundation last spring to southeast Uganda on the Kenyan border to look at water. Right, and what are we doing? And sort of, is it just about drinking water? Well, no, it's actually not, because in the show and tell, we would think it's just drinking water. It's not at all. The impact on girls is unbelievably devastating when we don't have facilities and clean water. So we can talk about that as an aside. But we were getting ready to film, and I thought, what am I going to ask Abba? Right, I've traveled with this man. You have some camaraderie, some rapport, and I thought, I've got to lean back into what I said in the very beginning, right? I have to lean into when I was with Magic, and I just went, all right, what do we share here, right, as humans? And what I'd like to think is that what you see here is putting it all together, being purposeful in our approach to securing a story, understanding the impact, that just because I might ask personal questions and get to know you better doesn't mean that you can't communicate what you do in your everyday life, that those things are not separate at all. And so let's see how I do in this, but I'd like to think that I understood my role in this story with Abba.
And the logic as to why this school is having a bigger population and
Do you feel that you're at home here, back in your continent? And what are the sights and smells that you're seeing that maybe I'm not?
Oh, the first thing you notice is the red soil. The red soil has a special flavor because you can actually eat it. You can actually eat it, not in volume, but you can actually eat it because it contains a lot of minerals. But this is one of those memories that you remember as a child, the red soil. So yes, I feel like I'm home. I feel like I am in a place where I feel confident, and I melt in, which I don't always do in Stockholm. I love being here. I enjoy.
Explain that feeling. Your body changes and you say, look,
yeah,
explain it.
It's all, I mean, the minute that I landed at the airport, the minute that we're in the bush now, you feel it's a relief. The air.
You breathe easier?
You breathe easier. My system opens up easier. I feel more as a human being.
Talk about the moment when you first even thought about a foundation.
It all started when I was on a trip to Kenya, and we were privileged to visit a Samburu village. We were welcomed in the village with the chief and a mother with a small infant child. An hour later, when we left the village, that infant died. The cause of the death was lack of water. This is how it started. We went back to Stockholm, and then I founded Upashala Foundation. And the main cause is provide people whenever we can, however we can, with water, with toilets. Those two things, we take them for granted, but those two things will stop any society. Just try for one day not going to the bathroom, or just try one day not drinking water. See how your body will react.
This is personal for you.
It is personal. It is personal. And as a father, when you see your own child suffering and you know you can help, just imagine those mothers and fathers who have children and they cannot help because they don't have access to water. The basic need of human life, water. Water is life. Without water, nothing functions. Nothing lives. It's impossible.
So what I love about that clip is that it's sort of everything all in one, right? We got to know who he is. We got to understand the origins of what it's like for him to be back on his home continent. We also understand what purpose he has and how he wants to communicate that story and make a difference, have an impact, so he is secure in his role. That, to me, in a 3-minute clip, captures the way in which we can think about the people that we engage with, right? Because stories, they reveal, I talk about this all the time, they reveal, they inspire, and they define. And so what I love about this group, as I'm getting to learn more and more about leadership at the alumni level, is the care, right? That element of care that says, yes, I was a student here, and however many years ago it was for me, 98, long time ago it feels like, but it's still within me. And that means something to my life. It means something to the people I engage with and those that I want to impact in a really positive manner as I develop relationships. That, to me, is the power of storytelling. I think there's an incredible opportunity to do that here today because I know that Michigan State is a community, it's a home, and it's a family. And with that being said, I'd like to welcome up one of our own, Todd Duckett. Could you please join me up here, sir? A round of applause.
How y'all doing? Go green.
See, you're home, aren't you?
Always.
Hey, Connor, can you turn that down? We're all good now? We're better? You're my guy. Where? Okay. Todd, it's great to spend time with you. I know we chatted on the phone briefly. I want to understand, you, in reading about you, you talked about, you said that at one point you said Sparty limited me and that you're limitless. And so with that as a bit of the preamble, I'd love to understand, was there a moment when you knew your story changed. And I would imagine it probably wasn't on the football field at all. Was it in a time of isolation or when you were by yourself, a quiet moment before you went to sleep? But when did you realize that your story had changed?
That's a great question. I would say we change all the time. We're always transforming, we're always changing. So going from having a dream to come to school here, that was part of the story. Then getting here and making memories, that was part of the story. And then being done playing here, that was another story. That story, though, I didn't have any answers to. And I was now done playing pro football. I had lost my identity. I didn't know I didn't know how to write a story. I didn't know what story I was telling. And I had a moment where I was actually leaving Rick's. And I was 30 years old at the time. And my career was over, and I was just hanging out. I was having probably way too much fun. And I was walking, I lived in some condos here around the corner, and I was walking back, and I saw a homeless man, and I was sitting on a bench, and he was going through the garbage. And when I saw him, and this was over by Crunchies, and his face ended up in the street light. And so this is probably 3 a.m, and I see his face. And in that moment, I see my face on his face. And I'm looking, and that woke me up. And so I'm seeing his face, knowing the stories of past athletes, knowing what former professional athletes have gone through. And when I saw his face, that told me where I was. If I keep up this direction, this course of my life, that potentially could be my outcome. So in that moment, my story changed. And then I'm like, okay, what do you do? Where do you go from here? But that's not gonna be it.
Now, when I hear you talking, it makes me think about scripts in our lives. Mm-hmm. That there are these times where you almost feel like we're on a conveyor belt, like it's automatic, like the next step is coming and we see it, and the one following that. And then there comes a point in time where we actually have to write our own script. And sometimes I wonder if we are prepared to write a script of what our future is going to sort of look like. And my experience of you, Todd, is purpose. Like that just screams through everything that I've seen when we've talked, that you, in essence, don't do anything if we don't have purpose behind it. Is that a part of the active script, and does it allow you to live off script?
Yeah, I would say we all have roles that we play in our life. And roles, you have a script in that role. But it's knowing who you are and your identity when you play these roles. There was a role when I was a Michigan State football player. That was a role. There was a role when I was an NFL player. That was a role. Now my role is daddy, is husband. It's being there for my kids and my family. That's a completely different role, completely different script. But finding who I am at my core and understanding that I am somebody, that I do have a purpose, that I do have dreams, that is what keeps propelling me to do the things that matter. And that script's going to change, because pretty soon, daddy, my kids are gonna call me by my first name. I'm like, what? Who are you talking to? Yeah. And in that moment, the roles will start to change again. And the thing was, from a kid having a dream to play in the NFL, there's already a script. You go to class, be good, work out, let God bless you, catch a touchdown with 1 second left, and kind of keep it. But the problem, though, then when you enter, for me, when I became 30 and I entered a different role, now I have to write the script. I don't know what it means to be. I don't know what life is after football. I didn't read that part. I didn't get that information. My brother Tico helped guide me, so I had some cliff notes. But other than that, you're creating it. And the thing that kept me there was, what is my purpose? Where's my destination? And God didn't put me on this planet for 30 years just to be a football player. Is that it? There has to be more. There has to be something else that's about me, and that's the motivation. And I think sometimes us as people, we don't value ourselves that way. We say, this is it. This is the hardest part. Like these stories you were telling, I mean, this is happening in our country. Like this is happening. All of us have to figure out how to eat. All of us have to. Now there's different levels of that, but it's still the essence of the emotion is survival. And yeah, we have more resources to do that than some other areas, but do we take advantage of it? Not all the time. So it becomes down to, in your core, you have the gift, the opportunity, the blessing to be on this planet for maybe 50 years, maybe 60, 70 years. So in that time, be willing to be flexible and know that your story is influencing a lot of people. Mainly your family, your kids, the ones who see you and really care for you on a regular basis. So knowing that and learning that, and I was depressed for about 10 years. And so I've done a lot of personal work, a lot of personal development to even get to the point to share these conversations.
So Todd, then I'd be curious as to your response when I brought up the saying, I don't know if you were here for that, the saying that, when you're happy, you remember a song, but when you're sad, you understand the lyrics.
Sure.
How did you take that in when you apply it to that decade of, I guess, of questioning the world around you?
It was darkness. It was darkness, and I was moving forward, but I didn't know it. I couldn't see my steps, but I was slowly progressing forward, and then, one day you see someone who's going through the same path you're on, and you have a conversation. Let's say that's a student athlete, and you start to have the conversation, and then they're asking the questions, and you got an answer, but it's a real heartfelt answer, and that starts happening time and time and time again. Then you're like, wow, am I moving up this ladder? Am I doing something? It don't feel like it, but I think I'm actually growing. And then you can have an opportunity to sit on the stage with you in front of the Spartans and speak your truth, and you're like, okay, this reminds me of a Saturday morning. Like, I like this feeling. So then you continue to do your work.
When I think about the audience that we are a part of here today in representation, right, alumni, I think the general public, when they think about who represents a university and the colors that are associated with university, it's the athlete, because they're easily accessible through our TVs, right, and our fandom of sports. But I wonder what it's like to be in that seat, because you're one of one, unless there's a Spartan here that I'm offending here, and you were an athlete here. But is that I'm wondering what it's like to be forced into representation and how that impacts the way in which you can communicate your story to connect with other student athletes. Because, as a dad, I wonder about my son and some of his athletic, goals, and thinking it's a very different world than when you were playing and when I was here on campus, and what it means to represent. So when we think about the word represent and how it ties to you and being a Spartan, has it been a love sort of relationship the whole time, or has it been a push-pull in trying to understand where you fit representing the university, whether you liked it or not?
Yeah, it has. It's been up and down. As a kid, I dreamed of coming to school here, so that was everything. But once you get to school here and then you leave, in my experience, after I was done and I was kind of lost in the world, I came back here. And I'm knocking on the doors, but they're locked now. I'm not a student athlete anymore. So I don't have the access. I don't have that. Before I came here, it was doors were wide open, everybody loves you, you can have whatever you want. Now I come back when I really actually need this. I'm a kid now, or I'm a young man, but I'm still mentally a kid and I need that love. I come back and I'm not the priority anymore. And so that, now I'm like, forget the university. I don't.
So you had a period where you
Of course. I had a period where I was like, man, you're talking about we're family, but here I am in my darkest time, and I have no help. I have no support. But, you're patting me on my back for a great game, and I'm switching my name and trying to leave football behind, but that's not coming back for help. And then I had a chance, like going through that stage, I sat and I really had to talk with myself and said, man, you're 30-something years old. You're not an 18-year-old kid. And then I started to think about the connections, the resources, the tools, the things that I learned. And quieting that noise and hearing what I actually learned, I had all these amazing tools that the university gave me. Now I have to actually play with them. I actually have to have confidence in myself to go in the world and display what that was. And then when I was able to do that, now I fell back in love with the university. Now I'm like, okay, I get it. How can I help? And it's not about what can they give me. Now it's what can I do for the university? What can I participate? And representing that brand, I mean, I would love for them to pay me to do things. but that's not what it's about anymore. I mean, it's about that 18 or so year old who has this dream, who's going to go through a process, whatever, pro, no pro, hurt, coaches change, whatever it is, student athlete wise, and I can actually help that person representing the university, having bleeded the green, and know that these young men and young women still have a whole life to live, and still they're Spartans forever.
So I picked this image, it's your image, I hope you don't mind, where it's sort of that split, the helmet, right? I'm wondering how does your story, and I love the way you sort of painted the picture of when you fell out of love with Michigan State, but then realized, wait a minute here. You provided a reframe on your own story. How different is the TJ story of Michigan State from the one that you tell now as Todd?
Completely different. It's two different lives, two different roles, two different expectations from myself, from others. But the core of who my character is the same. And I had to, when I was going through my transformation, that inner child conversation, that character conversation. And I just kept going back to, man, you can do stuff, bro. Like you had a dream and you did something that a lot of people aren't able to do. So why do you think you can't put your left shoe on first? Like, why do you think you can't do these things? And as a kid, at 8 years old, when I started the dream, I couldn't even catch a football. So I didn't have the skills and the tools, but I sure was going to be that guy. And over the years, that happened. Now, back to the character, and now, I didn't know I didn't know anything about a 30-year-old plus me. So I knew I wanted to help people. Let's start there. And then from there, I was able to just build myself. And when your bucket's full is when you can actually help others. And then being authentic and telling your truth.
So how do you measure impact now? I think I have an idea, but I think it would be valuable for us as a group to hear it, because that's the transformation, I think, for any student that graduates. You don't have to be an athlete. Right, we have grades, we have the degrees we obtain, all these sorts of things that tell us, that's the impact, that's the result. But then you enter adulthood, and to your point, there's no rule book. Was that a struggle? Did you feel like you had the tools needed to be able to lay out your own personal blueprint where you could identify where and when you were making impact, and if you had, looking retroactively at it?
No, I didn't have the tools then. I think start from the beginning of the transformation, it was being able to talk to someone, share a story, and feel their energy change. Feel like, wow, they felt my words. But now my impact is about me. It's about, do I feel good doing this? And if I do something and I feel good about it, and it feels like it represents me and it's me to my core, that's it. Like, when I played football, I loved the game, just happened to have 100,000 people watching. So now I love who I am, and if who I am helps others, great. But if I'm lying to myself, and if I'm not being true to myself in these events, then the impact doesn't matter. So now it's about, man, can I wake up every day, look myself in the mirror, and say, bro, yeah, you're going to have a great day. And then at the end of the day, look myself in the mirror and say, yeah, we did that. And then lay back down and do that again. And now there's stress, there's kids, there's life. So you got to keep pushing that envelope, and that's the impact. And now it's, people think, how many likes did I get? Like, how many times did someone view my video? And if they don't get enough of that confirmation, they feel like they didn't have an impact. But yet, if you're willing to put your story out there and feel comfortable, that's the biggest impact, in my opinion, that you can have on yourself and the community.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question because being a football player, playing a very violent sport that I would have never been able to play, you walk away feeling things in your body for years, the impact of that. So if that's sort of the premise, where do you feel it in your body now when you engage with people and you're not TJ, you're Todd, you're the guy that cares, that has purpose, that's a dad, right? That's a brother, that's a business owner. Tell me where you feel that in your body, and is it a different experience for you viscerally?
You know, I feel it in my heart, and I get emotional because it's the same energy you put on the field. Like, this is the passion. Like, it's passion. That's what allows you to go and play the game. That's what allows you to get hit over and over again and get back up and say, I want the ball again. Like, that's the energy, that's the love. And now I know when I feel like this is what I used to feel like when I go in the weight room. Like, this is what it's about. But now to be like this, to give and serve, to be like this, to speak your message, to be like this, to have an impact, that's how I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, it's been an absolute treat. I don't know if you're going to be able to spend some time today or not. I don't know your schedule, but I would encourage people to get to know you, because when I got connected with Todd, the first experience, just even over email, it was so engaging and personal, as if we shared a sideline together. Let alone, it didn't, you know, I got the sense it wouldn't have mattered if I was a Spartan or not. And I remember that day telling my son, because he's a big sports guy, I said, guess who Daddy gets to talk to, you know? He researched and everything, and I said, he's just the nicest guy, and he looks like he's violent out there, Daddy.
That's right.
That's right, that's right. But what a treat to have you here, and I think you speak in a way, and you share a story of purpose that I think we can all connect to. It has impact, and it sounds like you've really found your role. Let's give a warm round of applause for Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I agree.